Today we're going to repair this hole with some Bondo. We're going to be using the short strand fiberglass. So this is marine grade. What we're going to do is we're going to go over the top, just kind of get somewhat of a base for this to adhere to. This is going to be the fiberglass mesh. And then we're going to go to the underside to seal this through. So the first side is basically going to be the top coat. We're going to let this harden, and then we're going to go to the bottom side and fill it in once we have the top coat there. And then we'll seal over it with another sealer, but we'll show you how that looks later. Things first, you do want to sand this down and get this cleaned out. For the most part, this is sanded down and clean. So just for something the Bondo to adhere to. It won't adhere well to wet wood, so make sure you get all the wet wood out. You can also let it dry out too. This is what we got so far. See, it's starting to get pretty solid and hard. This is the first coat. We're spreading it out so that way when it is on the actual boat itself, like the water pushing through, the surface area is spread. But we're gonna go on the underside and we're gonna put some more of this wire mesh down there. I'll show you what that looks like down there, but this is the first one just to kind of seal up the hole and be able to push against something, because without this, there is literally nothing to hold to. So we need to be able to have this mesh on the top. That way, when we're putting the Bondo at the bottom, it has something to push against. This is the underside. Went ahead and filled it with some of the Bondo. Right now it's drying. This is the second coat. We're actually gonna put a couple of coats on this, but it's as smooth as it's gonna get. We're probably gonna put some Flex Seal over the top. Again, really the main goal of this is to waterproof it. And then we're gonna fill in this little gap over here. This is mainly where all the water was getting in, but we'll fill that in with some of the Bondo and some Flex Seal. Second coat up here. We're gonna go ahead and put a third one in, fill it in tomorrow. And then on the bottom, we did the same exact thing. We put another coat, actually put another sheet of fiberglass for it. It's basically just this stuff. Fiberglass mesh, and it just adheres to the Bondo, and it just makes a better surface for the Bondo to grab onto. But we'll show you guys the updated results tomorrow. This is kind of what the Bondo looks like when it dries up. This is the jar I was using to mix, but you can kind of see it's kind of whatever. It pulls out all in one piece. Right now I'm mixing up the Bondo. This is the Bondo material without the hardener. So next I'm gonna put in the hardener. You don't put a ton of it. You can put a lot if you want, but it dries quicker. I actually used 1 tube for 2 jars. That's kind of the ratio that I use, but you can kind of see like that's the amount that I found that works the best. With this amount that I'm using, it probably takes about 4 to 5 minutes before it starts getting really, really thick and like really dry. You saw in the sour cream jar how it was kind of solid. You could just pull it out in one piece. This, it's actually pliable, it's maneuverable. I can spread it pretty well. Think of it kind of like a peanut butter, but when it starts to dry, it's kind of like not a crunchy peanut butter, but more of like a stringy one. But you can kind of see here, it's kind of pasty. But the goal is to kind of to spread this in and spread it thin. This is the second or third coat at the top. So more so, I'm not trying to just kind of like fill in holes at this point. Now I'm kind of trying to make the surface area to catch the water. I don't want any gaps. I don't want any holes. I kind of want it like one single piece going up against the boat and then also to the bottom. So think of this material kind of like a pliable plastic. So you can basically move the plastic however you want, and then it dries up like that shape. So my whole goal is to catch the water and keep it from getting inside the wood and leaking through the boat. This is how the leak was caused anyways. Water was just sitting on top and it was rotting the wood over time. And then eventually the seal that was there, it was an epoxy-based paint, it failed. And after it failed, it got in the wood and it did its thing, which is rotting the wood. And that's why there's a hole in it now. But this is basically the process of laying the Bondo out. I just wanted to show you this part just so you guys can see the method. You see how I'm kind of leveling or creating somewhat of a base and then climbing it into the walls or above the walls, because this is where water is going to pool. Also in the corner, notice how there's no hole. I'm probably going to need to drill a hole in the a little section. That way the water is free flowing. I'm considering just leaving it without the hole. And why is I don't want to mess up with the integrity of the Bondo, and I would rather just have it watertight and water sealed, and then just have to deal with sponging this section out. Kind of the process and what the Bondo application looks like. You're gonna do like 2, 3, 4 layers depending on how thick you want. This is inside the hole, and then I have some wooden covering. You kind of saw it a little bit earlier. I'm sitting on it right now, but it just goes over the top of this, so you really can't see this. And also after this is done, I'm going to paint. Well, first I'm going to Flex Seal it and then epoxy paint it. I may just stick with just a white Flex Seal just to have a water base in the inside. It's a rubberized coating, so I'm not really worried about aesthetics and looks because this is going to be covered up anyways. So you can't even see this little section here on the boat. So some things I wish I would have done different, because I don't do boats all the time. I just thought I'd attempt this and see what happens and see how it goes. And it works, it's fine. But the first thing I would have done is had the boat upside down. This was a heavier boat. It was already on the lift, so it was more convenient and easier to do it this way. And I started the inside and going out. The opposite would have been better, starting from the outside and then in. That way, having the shell and then using this inside here and just basically just pouring and filling the Bondo in. Either way, I have 2 layers, or actually 3 layers of fiberglass resin, 2 on the bottom of the boat and then 1 on the top. So there's plenty of Bondo and plenty of seal. I used almost 3 cans. So just for this little hole, so I'm more than sufficient for what I did. But first is starting from the bottom of the boat and then filling in. So creating that seal on the top. That's also the second thing, is do it upside down. So gravity works for me. Right now, gravity was working against me. Painting under the boat, sitting in a kayak, not so much. This stuff just gets everywhere. Third is make sure not to use a ton of hardener at first. The very first batch I did, I put in a bunch of hardener because I thought, oh, okay, I don't want it to dry soft. Well, after working with this, you don't have to use a bunch of hardener. In fact, the more hardener you use, it just dries quicker. In fact, what I did is each can, I probably split it up into 4 different applications. So I poured some into the sour cream jar, as you saw, added some hardener, and then I went ahead and applied it. This stuff dries pretty quick, and the more hardener you use, it dries even quicker, and it becomes really hard to work with. You got to do multiple coats. So again, I would recommend splitting it up into multiple sections like I did. Next is have patience and wear protective clothing. This stuff burns, especially if you get it on your skin. I'm sure most of you already know that, but I'm wearing gloves. Make sure you're wearing protective clothing, goggles, glasses, and everything. And the smell, it really stinks. So preferably use a good respirator to be able to not have that inhalation. Next is have the fiberglass mesh ready before you mix. So have it cut to size and ready to go. That way you don't have it mixed, it's hardening while you're cutting it, measuring, all that jazz. Just have it cut to size and ready to go. Again, I'm not a pro by any means. This is just what worked for me, and this is what I used, and this is what I found. This size hole, I used 3 packs of Bondo and 3 different coats. So 3 on the top and 3 on the bottom. And then I'm going over Flex Seal on the top of this. I'm doing a couple coats of that. But overall, the thing is pretty solid. It's actually a lot better than if it was just original wood. We are sanded down pretty smooth. We aren't gonna go super smooth, but this is kind of what we're looking for. And now we're ready to go ahead and get some Flex Seal on this. So it's pretty solid, but basically we're just gonna get in Flex Seal for extra precaution. And then we're also gonna go over it with some epoxy paint, just again for some extra precaution. But yeah, that's basically how you seal it. We'll show you what it looks like later. Here's the first coat. We're gonna do a couple of coats, but the goal is to try to make it as thin as possible and then just keep spraying multiple coats. We're probably gonna do about a total of 3 different coats on this. All right, so it cured for 48 hours. It's pretty solid. We had the Flex Seal on the bottom. We still didn't do the epoxy paint, but it doesn't seem to be taking on any water. Been on the water for like 10 minutes now. So yeah, it's holding up pretty well. Obviously, the next thing that we need to do is drill a hole in here. We'll probably going to refrain from doing that just so it still has the structural integrity. And then we're going to epoxy the bottom. But that is basically how you use Bondo and kind of rig it. Obviously, it's not the proper way to do it. The proper way would be to replace the wood and completely redo it. But this is sufficient, it works, and you can do it yourself. I've never done this, so you guys can do it as well.